Ready? Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Hari Om Swamiji.
Hari Om.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the continuation of the discussion on the foundational texts of Indian philosophy. This meeting will be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. So if you have missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. Also, there will be a question and answer segment at the end of the discussions. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. Please use the raise hand feature of Zoom in order to maintain the queue. If you're not speaking, please mute yourselves in order to minimize the disturbances. Thank you.
So,
Recording in progress.
thank you, Prajwal. Good evening. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. So we were discussing this system of Indian philosophy called Dvaita Siddhanta. Sometimes it is called Madhva Siddhanta, Madhvacharya's philosophy, which emphasizes the fundamental and eternal difference between God on the one hand and all other living beings on the other. It is called Panchabheda Siddhanta, the doctrine of eternal lasting difference between different living beings, between all of us and God, and among different organic substances in the phenomenal world, empirical world. So this is called the doctrine of difference. Now, in the Vedic literature, in the Upanishad literature, you find statements which apparently support the doctrine of difference. But going deeper, you will see that it is only on the surface. Based on this, different concepts of spiritual liberation, spiritual enlightenment were developed among different schools of both Advaitins, Dvaitins and Vishishtadvaitins, and also among the other non-Advaitic systems of Vedanta philosophy. According to Vallabha, Nimbarka, Chaitanya, Baladeva, which belong to Chaitanya school, and others. One of the earlier philosophers who tried to reconcile the statements supporting difference and the statements supporting identity, non-difference. His name is Bhaktir Prapancha. Sometimes, he also is called a philosopher who believed in the combination of jnana and karma, jnana karma samutsevada, doctrine that tells you that even after your spiritual enlightenment, even after reaching the highest Advaitic experience, you should continue performing your duties, your rituals and ceremonies every day. So his name is Bhaktir Prapancha. So in a way he believed in both difference and also identity. So it's called the Bheda Siddhanta, means the doctrine of identity and difference. And he said, in fact, of course this was before Shankara. Following his view, many other non-Advaitic philosophers also try to emphasize that one should read the important scriptural statements and then continue meditating upon the meaning, Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, and gradually he can get spiritual liberation. This school was technically called Prasankyanavada. I discussed this elaborately when I discussed the Advaita school, which covers quite an extensive period of discussions, almost 47 classes we did on Advaita. According to Advaitin Sri Shankaracharya, if you are already fully established in the four important qualifications called sadhana chatushtayam, or if you are already a sadhana chatushtaya sampanna, somebody who entered, who is established in the four fundamental primary disciplines, called, for example, a proper understanding of what is absolutely real and what is only relatively real, what is relative and what is absolute. A proper discerning wisdom and a sense of renunciation of the non-absolute, and certain mental sensory disciplines like Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, etc. I discuss sadhana, Chatushtaya Sambati, four important disciplines. If any of you have got doubt, if you want me to repeat, I shall elaborately describe this during the time of interaction after the lecture. And fourth one is Mumukshutvam, four disciplines. So Shankaracharya said, you are fully established in all spiritual disciplines. Then, even when you get an instruction on the Upadesha, that is instruction, Tattwamasi Mahavakya, the great statement from Chandogya Upanishad, immediately it will strike a note in your heart. You can relate it as your own experience. This is called Sabda Parokshvada, means you don't have to perform any more discipline if you are fully established in your spiritual qualifications. To give an example, I gave this example many times, many examples I gave, but just repeating once more. Suppose you are already well established in all the previous lessons from the fourth grade. Suppose you have got a very high grade in your fourth grade examination, 100% mark in everything. Then when you go and sit on the fifth grade, on the day one, when teacher is explaining to you a lesson, you're immediately able to grasp it. Why? Because you are so well established in all the prerequisites of the previous class, fourth grade. You don't need to go and think and contemplate and struggle hard to understand something that is very much within your own range, with your own knowledge. Like that, a fully spiritually qualified person will be able to relate Advaitic reality when he hears this. This need not necessarily be in one life. If you are already well established in some kind of Advaitic disciplines in your previous life, and you perhaps don't take much interest in spiritual matters, in this life, if you happen to go to a library and take the Chandogya Upanishad, if you read this Tattwamasi Mahavakya, it will be something that you will feel at home with. And then somehow you will be able to relate something, and you may feel when approach is true. It's because your mind is already prepared to understand the implication of this great statement. Without some degree of previous experience, you won't be able to take even an interest in the higher subtle philosophy. You can say terrible boredom and you run away from it. If you are exposed to something which is very profound, for which you are not ready, not necessarily in this life, in previous life cycles. Now, I'm going to discuss today, to drive home the fundamental difference between Madhvacharya and Shankaracharya. I'm going to discuss this in the light of some very important passages from Chandogya Upanishad. How the same Upanishadic statements are viewed and interpreted in entirely different manner by Advaitin Shankaracharya and Dvaitin Madhvacharya. Totally different, absolutely polar opposites. And so the meaning of Tattwamasi Mahavakya, which we described elaborately in our sessions on Dvaita philosophy. Tattwamasi Mahavakya is a statement from Chandogya Upanishad. And there are 4 Mahavakyas, each representing one of the 4 Vedas. Tattwamasi is from Chandogya Upanishad, 6th chapter, from Samaveda. Aham Brahmasmi is the great statement of Mahavakya indicating experience. And Bhudivakya, it is from Yajurveda and it is from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So Tattwamasi is Upadeshavakya, the statement of instruction. Aham Brahmasmi is a statement indicating our internal, spiritual, mystical experience of our identity and oneness with the entire existence. It is from Yajurveda. And then Prajnanam Brahma is from Aitareya Upanishad, which is actually from Rigveda. The highest knowledge, highest internal experience, the consciousness, the supreme awareness itself is Brahman. Brahman functioning as supreme consciousness and supreme awareness without any other attributes to it. From Rigveda. And the 4th one is Ayam Atma Brahma, it is from Mandukya Upanishad. All this we discussed in the previous sessions, in Advaita sessions. It is from Atharva Veda, it is from Mandukya Upanishad. Now, this mantra we are going to discuss and how Madhvacharya puts it in a totally different fashion. Not only Madhva and all other subsequent Madhva philosophers. It's a supreme illustration of this freedom of expression. The same statement, the same ancient sacred statements, viewed from an entirely different perspective. Now, according to Advaitins, the other view is not wrong. It only represents a state of awareness which is yet not fully completed. Advaita accommodates within its fold both the Visishtadvaita of Ramanuja and also the Dvaita of Madhvacharya and also Suddhadvaita, Dvaita, all other statements, Nimbarka, Vallabha and Achintya Bheda, Veda of Chaitanya, and all are accommodated in Advaita system. So the statement is Saya Esha Anima Aitadatmimidam Sarvam Tasatyam Sa Atma Tattwamasi Shvetaketo. This is the statement. Now, what the statement actually means is this. It essentially tells, it's an instruction from Uddalaka to Shvetaketu. Uddalaka is a father and also guru to Shvetaketu, his son. The statement is very simple. That supreme reality, that is you yourself, that supreme subtle reality is yourself. But then it is not the literal meaning. As a literal meaning, it doesn't make sense. For example, in the Tattwamasi Mahavakya, there is a twofold method of reading and understanding. One is Vachyartha, the other is Lakshyartha. Literal interpretation and also the implied interpretation. Literal interpretation, Vachyartha, for example, Tat means Ishvara and Tvam means Jiva. Asi means, it implies joining, they are the same. Now, according to Advaitins, the implied meaning, which is different from the literal meaning, is Jiva Brahma Aikyam. Tat is Brahman and Tvam is Jiva. And this meaning is derived by using a methodology. That means the expressed meaning, the openly expressed meaning is partly retained and partly given up. It's called Bhagatyaga Lakshana. Jagat Ajaha Lakshana means using the method of interpreting the meaning, the implication of the Mahavakya according to Lakshana. Now, Madhvacharya says there is no need to rely upon the Lakshyartha or Jagat Jagalakshana. He says it can mean something, there is no need to go for any kind of Lakshana. But according to Dvaita Siddhanta, I mentioned earlier, according to Vyasatirtha, in his own statement, means it is not Tattvamasi, it is Atattvamasi. For example, he says Sa Atma Atattvamasi. So in the statement, Tat Satyam Sa Atma. Atma is a long vowel. So if you write it together by constant repetition, continued pronunciation, we may we need not necessarily read as Tattvamasi. You can separate the words as Sa Atma Atattvamasi. Grammatically, it can be justified and defended. So something which can be grammatically justified and defended cannot be defended or justified philosophically. But then, according to Dvaita philosophers, later there are quite a few, and the most prominent among them was Jayatirtha, who actually laid a strong foundation to the Dvaita metaphysics. He is one of the most prominent writers after Madhvacharya. Of course, Jayatirtha and Vyasatirtha, two of them are important. Jayatirtha's commentaries and tegas on Madhvacharya's works, and Vyasatirtha, who wrote the well-known dialectical magnum opus, is known as Nyayamrita, in which he refutes the definitions of Mithyatva as given by four of the great post-Shankarite Advaitins. If you have got any doubt, I already explained this, the five definitions of Mithyatvam according to Advaitins, which were refuted by Vyasatirtha in Nyayamrita, which were again defended by Madhusudana Saraswati in Advaita City, which already discussed earlier. Now, according to, you can imagine, this is very interesting, according to Dvaita philosophers, the word Tat can also be read as or interpreted as Tasmad. Because of that, Tasmai, for that, Tasmad, from that, Tasya, of that. So, that what does it mean? Tattvamasi means Tattvam, Tat Atattvamasi. Tat Atattva means Tat Atattvam. So what it means, you belong to that God, you are of that God, and you are not independent of God, you are dependent upon that God. So, in Madhva Siddhanta, Jivas and Brahman, or that means Vishnu, according to Madhva Siddhanta, Jiva and Vishnu, both are real, but both are not Swatantra. They are Sat, but they are Paratantra, which means Jivas are Paratantra. Jivas are dependent upon God. There is only Swatantra, one Swatantra entity, that is Vishnu. That's a fundamental thesis of this Madhvacharya system. So, O Shvetaketu, you are dependent upon Brahman, Vishnu. You are not independent. According to Advaita, it means Tvam is Kudastha Jiva, the true being within you. Shvetaketu minus his body, mind, complex, his senses, mind, everything. You remove from Shvetaketu all his body, all his mind, all his buddhi, intellect, everything, all his body, mind, complex. Remove it. What is Shvetaketu? Shvetaketu is only Kudastha Chaitanyam. It is subtle reality itself, encased or embodied in a body-mind complex. That body-mind complex is only a means for expressing the divine. In essence, it is divinity alone. In all of us, if you remove our body-mind complex, then we are all the same Brahman. Jiva is Kudastha Chaitanyam. Chaitanyam which is Kudastha means the space which is encased in a pot. So you can imagine, compare the space within a pot and the space outside the pot. They are actually the same. You break the pot, then the space within the pot, which appeared to be encased or limited by the dimension of the pot, it merges with the space outside Mahakasha. So Ghatakasha, the space within the pot, and Mahakasha, the space outside the pot, they're the same. What is the difference? This pot is there, and the pot comes and goes. Space remains same. Our body comes and goes. Within the body and beyond the body, encased and residing within the body, there is the Atman, and that Atman is like Udastha Chaitanyam. It is just that supreme reality which appears to be limited by this body-mind complex. This is what Advaita means. So this idea is not very often recognized. So forgetting that, Shankaracharya did not say that we living beings are all God. He did not say that. He did not say you are God. Man driving a car in the street is a God. He didn't say that. But he said, within that person who is driving the car, there is the presence of the divine spark. And that divine spark is the same as the all-pervading, omnipresent, immanent and transcendental reality. So, according to some Dvaita philosophers, if you pronounce this, sa atma tattvamasi, etc., sa atma tattvamasi, you can also pronounce sa atma atattvamasi. It's a long vowel that comes after ma. It can be added to tattvamasi, so it becomes atma tattvamasi, atma atattvamasi. You are not that. Instead of saying you are that, because you are not that, which means you are different from that. You are different from Brahman. You are different from God. That difference is Panchaveda Siddhanta. Of course, this comes even earlier in the Chandogya. In the same chapter, the second khanda even, Satu eva somidam agrasid ekam eva dvidiyam. Satveva saumya idam agramasid. Agra means agre. You may read the text agra, which is agre, means tu soumya idam agre ekameva dvidiyam sadeva asid. So here's an instruction, an advice from Uddalaka to Shetagaidu. In the beginning, before creation of all these phenomenal empirical things, there was nothing but the one non-dual existence, absolute reality. There was nothing else. Now, this is, in this statement, for example, Madhvacharya, the Dvaitins will tell you, this shows that Advitiyam, Advitiyam means one without a second. One without a second normally means Advaita, non-duality. But it means, according to the followers of Madhvacharya, it means that God is totally independent, one without a second, supreme. There is nothing in this world which is equal to Him. So, a statement which is obviously Advaitic becomes a strong statement defending Dvaita Siddhanta. I am just giving one example. You have to remember, we should never forget the fact Madhvacharya was a great saint, a great devotee. Not only that, the greatest and maybe the originator of South Indian music called Carnatic music. Actually, that tradition goes back to the great musical composer who lived in 16th century, Purendradasa. He himself was a great follower of Madhvacharya. So, the philosophy for a Western reader may appear to be some kind of a emphatic statement that the fundamental difference of everything in this world, but philosophy also had a great devotional heritage, because that philosophy inspired a great man who was actually a very rich man, a super rich man who renounced everything. He had a miraculous experience in his life, Virendradasa, and eventually he composed several hundreds of thousands of great music, devotional songs in praise of God, and is considered to be the grandfather, the original ancestor of the great tradition of South Indian classical music, Carnatic music. So that aspect also should be kept in mind. Madhvacharya himself inspired many great devotees of God by his emphasis on the importance of God's grace for spiritual seekers, spiritual enlightenment. So that also should be kept in mind, and we should not lose sight of the great contribution, indirectly though, of Madhvacharya towards the devotional heritage of one very important school of Indian music, Indian devotional music especially. Now we are going to discuss some of the statements from the text itself, from Chandogya Upanishad itself. All these statements which I am going to read or recite are directly taken from the 6th chapter of the Chandogya Upanishad, which actually represents Samaveda tradition. I mentioned this earlier, the story background. I don't repeat again. A father advising or instructing his own son on the highest truth of non-dual oneness, non-dual unity and oneness of existence. So the statement should be kept in mind. The statement is this: Saya esha anima aitadapnimidam sarvam tasatyam sarma tattvamasi shvetakedo idi, etc. So when this teacher gave this instruction, the student did not understand at first, the son did not understand, so he requested his teacher, please repeat this again. Bhuya eva ma bhagavan vijñāpayatu idi. Please repeat this instruction again. And the father went on instructing this 8 times, total 9 statements. First statement and then 8 repetitions, with a fresh illustration to drive home the point. And finally, to the end of the text, Shvetaketu realized the spiritual implication of this Tattwamasi Mahavakya. Now here, there are many illustrations. I am just taking just a few. One is the illustration. It is called Vriksha Drishtanta. Drishtanta means example, illustration. Vriksha means tree. Now, it is an interesting thing. Asya soumya mahado vrikshasya yo mule abhyahanya jivan saved yo madhya abhyahanya jivan saved yo agre abhyahanya jivan saved sa esha jivena atma anuprabhuda pipiyamano modamanas tisthati. So vrikshasya yo mule abhyahanyat madhya abhyahanyat agre abhyahanyat. So the story is this. The teacher tells the father, look here, son, look at this tree. Now, if you take an axe or a cudgel or a knife, whatever it is, and you cut at the root of this tree, the middle of the tree, the trunk of the tree, or at the top of the tree, what happens, the tree doesn't die immediately because the tree is pervaded by the essence, that is the sap, we may call it. But when you cut the tree somewhere, the sap comes out, flows out. Like that, this entire tree is pervaded by jiva. And that jiva is an expression of Atman, the self. And so long as the tree is intact, it exists absorbing a huge quantities of water substances from the earth through its roots, and it experiences, stays there with great joy. But then, the moment that jiva, the life substance, which is pervaded all over the tree, when it withdraws from that tree, then it will die, the whole tree will die. If you cut one branch, only a branch will wither away, it will die, because the presence of the divine spark, which is manifesting in that branch of the tree as a sap, it gets dried up and the branch dies. So also if you cut in the middle, then also you will find the sap coming out. And also at the root, on the branch, in the middle, at the root, or on the top. So when that divine spark present in that tree in the form of jiva, in the form of its sap, maybe some kind of water its sap, when it gets dried up, that branch, that part of the tree withers away and it dies. But when the whole collection of that energy, the sap, when it withdraws itself from the tree, then what happens? The whole tree dies. Similarly, that means an example, the jiva, it pervades the body, it pervades all parts of the tree. And when it goes away, the tree, the human body also, when the jiva leaves the human body, the body is said to be dead. The commentaries and other books would say that jiva doesn't really disappear into oblivion. It doesn't merge with nothingness. That jiva, in the context of human being, that jiva finds its expression in another body. Which is maybe another plant, let us say. Now, according to Shankaracharya, this passage conveys the truth of the eternal nature of the jiva. That jiva is eternal, means it is the same as the all-pervading Brahman reality. Because when a huge tree dies away, gets dried up, that sap could be found in a plant which is growing beside the tree, somewhere around where the seeds are fallen, and the seeds will become a sprout. So practically, it never really disappears entirely. Similarly, the jiva which is present in one body-mind complex, expressing through one set of antakaranas, mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara, manifesting in so many different activities, thoughts and emotions. When that jiva disappears from it, the jiva doesn't die really, it only finds its presence, it begins to manifest in another body-mind complex. Only the body-mind complex changes. Jiva remains the same because the jiva can exist even without the physical body. So you have to think of the example that we have Chedavada, means the illustration using the space outside the pot and the space which appears to be encased and limited inside the pot. When you break the pot, the space within that pot it doesn't become non-existent. That space merges with the outer space, Mahakasha. Because there was really no distinction between the two. Only the pot, its shape, create the illusion, the wrong notion that there is a distinction between Ghatakasha, that is space within the pot, and the space outside the pot. Now Madhvacharya, according to Madhvacharya, in this passage, it only shows that God is present in the body and God is regulating, controlling, activating all individual beings. All individual beings are paratantra, means they are dependent or not independent. God alone is swatantra or God alone is independent. So when God leaves the body, Jiva also leaves, because the individual soul, Jivatma, cannot function without Ishvara, without God. Jivatma is dependent, paratantra, on Ishvara. So, to understand this, we should always remember the fundamental thesis in Dvaita Siddhanta: Vishnu alone is Swatantra, the absolute reality. And Jagat is only a superimposition. It is only an adhyaropita. It is only a superimposition. But Madhvacharya will not say it is a superimposition. It is also a reality. Only it is not swatantra. It is not independent. Dividham hi prameyam swatantram aswatantram cha. So an important point, remember. Dividham hi prameyam. The entire existence, there are only two things to be known. One is swatantra, the independent reality Vishnu, and aswatantra, the dependent Jivas. So according to Madhvacharya, this illustration shows the distinction, the difference, the eternal difference. By the very nature, Jivas are different from Ishvara, from Vishnu. This is the purpose of this illustration according to Madhvacharya. On the other hand, according to Shankaracharya, this illustration shows the all-pervading nature, the one supreme reality which expresses within a body as Jiva, which appears to be encased in a body-mind complex, just as space appears to be encased or to be limited within the small periphery of a pot. But that is only an apparent, because the pot, when you break it, it merges with the Mahakasha. And then there is, of course, this illustration is very interesting in a way, this illustration, and how the two schools view this illustration will give us a clear idea of the philosophical positions of these two schools, which appear to be contrasting schools of thought. There is another example called Nyagrodha Vriksha Drishtanta. The illustration based on a fig tree. So this also, just I shall, those who are interested, you can read this 6th chapter, 12th Khanda, means section of Chandogya Upanishad. Nyagrodha phalam ada aharaiti idam bhagavaiti bhinditi bhinnam bhagavaiti kimatra pashyasi iti anno ive ima thana bhagavaiti asam anga eka bhindi iti bhinna bhagavaiti kimatra pashyasi iti na kinchana bhagavaiti. It's a dialogue between Uddalaga and his son Shvetaketu. So the father asked his son, you bring me a fruit of this fig tree, Nyagrodha phala. And the son brought it, and then he asked him to cut it, and maybe again and again, and finally when it when the sun cut it again inside, he could not see anything. So he said, I am not able to see anything. Kimatra pashyasi? What do you see inside the seed? Nakinchana bhagavaiti. I don't see anything. So this is the simple illustration. Now according to Shankaracharya, this illustration is meant to show the creation of this gross and manifold world from this subtle reality which you do not see. The huge fig tree springs from the subtle seed. And if you break the seed again and again, inside you find a vacuum, a void. You are not able to see it. But that is the very origin of this tree, the huge tree. And Madhvacharya says, according to him, the illustration teaches the subtle nature of God. Not the subtle nature of Brahman, Atman, which is the origin of the universe, but the subtle nature. God creates his world from his subtle power. So in the previous illustration, for example, in the earlier illustration, when you cut the branch of the tree, the trunk of the tree, the middle and the top, what do you find? Immediately that part of the tree begins to dry up. Finally it dies. So finally, but if you put the whole thing, then if you just cut it down from the root, the whole tree falls down. After some time, it dies, it gets dried up because the divine spark in the form of the sap, the form of watery form inside the tree, it gets dried up and the tree dies away. But according to Madhvacharya, this shows the subtle nature of God. I mean, God is present in the body in a very subtle nature. Because there is God's support all the time, this tree is able to exist. Otherwise, it cannot exist. So, of course, this is being again the commentaries according to Jayatirtha. He says, for example, the tree stands for the world, the fruit for the body, and the seeds for the individual souls. So, the subtle seed can be seen, but if you cut it again, nothing is seen. There is a void, which actually is the origin of this tree. There is something in the seed which you are not able to see if you go deeper and deeper. That's the origin. So, the subtlety and how the subtle reality becomes the all-pervading reality, the immanent reality, the transcendental reality, which is beyond name and form, which is beyond pramana, sarva pramana, which is anirvachaniya. That's the view of Advaitins. And according to Madhvacharya, it shows the subtle nature, the glory of God. So there are quite a few illustrations. I may read one or two more illustrations. It's also from Chandogya. It is called Levana Uddaga Drishtanta. Levana means salt, Uddaga means water. So the father asked the son, you put some salt in a glass of water. So Levana meda Udagi Abadhayatha Ma Pradurupati Ubasi Dada Idi Sahatatha Cha Akara Tam Kovaja Yadosha Levana Udagi Abadha Angata Aharaidi Tatha Mrishyanna Viveda. So that's what it means the father, the guru, asked his son, you bring levanam udage avatha, means you bring some water and then some salt. Maybe in the evening, put it there. And morning, asked him, where is the salt? Salt is not there. So it's not visible, it's not seen. Then the son looked at it. Avamrishya na vivedaha. He looked at it, the salt has disappeared. Now, again, the father asked him, you drink it little, and then he found, though it cannot be seen, it can be experienced. He can feel the presence of salt in that water. Cannot be seen, but can be experienced by other means. Similarly, the Brahman, the Atman, the Sat, that's the context here, cannot be seen, but the Brahman can be experienced by other means. And that leads to another famous illustration that is much more important in this particular Chandogya Upanishad. I shall just refer to it, then I shall explain. This is a very important one, in which Madhvacharya and Shankaracharya both agrees with regard to the role of teacher in spiritual instruction. Yatha Swami Purusham Gandharebhyo Abhinadhakshamani Yatam Tato Adijani Visruje Sayatha Tatra Prangva Udangva Adhirangva Pratyangva Pratmayida Abhinadhaksha Anido Abhinadhaksho Visrishtaka. It's a very interesting, very important illustration. It is called Gandhara Purusha Drishtantaka. A man who came from Gandhara Desha. Gandhara is roughly corresponds to today's Kandahar in Afghanistan. It's a part of the place where Vedic culture was very strong and prevalent in ancient times during the early Vedic age. So a man who came from Gandhara Desha, he was going back to his place, but as he walked along the road that took him through a thick forest, he was waylaid by some highwaymen, maybe some robbers, who took away all his possessions, and then they dragged him into thick forest and tied him to a tree. Of course, he was blindfolded, so he could not see anything. And this blindfolded poor man was ambushed and dragged into a thick tree inside a thick forest. He was tied there. And the robbers went away. This is the first part of the story. Second part, this man, after some time, he starts crying and weeping, shouting, please come and help me, save me. I'm being left alone in this thick forest. So you should come and save me. So after some time, some passers-by, maybe some travelers who were also perhaps returning from Gandhara Desha, he heard this noise coming from a thick forest, and he came to the rescue of this man, untied the ropes, removed his blindfold, took him to the main road, and showed him Edandrisam Gandhara. I mean, go this way, you can reach your town, Gandhara. So, this compassionate traveler who happened to go by the same road, maybe returning from Gandhara Desha, entered the thick forest, liberated him, and brought him to the main road and showed him the direction so that he could go back to return to his hometown. Now this illustration shows one important difference between the two schools of thought. According to Madhvacharya, of course, he agrees with Shankaracharya, of course, with regard to the necessity of a preceptor or a teacher. You need a teacher. When you are left in a thick forest, tied to a tree and blindfolded, you need somebody to come to your rescue. That is true. But beyond that, Shankaracharya says, getting back to your own home actually corresponds to understanding our true nature, that we are Atman. So here, the journey is an illustration of our spiritual journey. We are going through thick forests, happiness and unhappiness, our own karma phalas, our own different experiences due to our own previous life cycles, accumulated karmas and karma, and the results we are going through all these thick forests. And suddenly we may lose our own sense of discerning wisdom. We lose our own power of discerning wisdom or power of discrimination, proper understanding, balance of mind, then what happens? We may be dragged into a thick forest as the robbers dragged the poor traveler. The robbers are our own desires, our own ambitions, our worldly greed, likes and dislikes, raga, dvesha, etc. So we get deluded. We lose our ability to see through the true nature of things in this world, that blindfold. And we lose our sense of purpose in life. We are dragged away from the main road. Then what happens? First we must realize that we are tied to a tree and we are not on a main road walking towards our destination. So we are deviated from our destination, or rather we are taken away from our true spiritual journey, true path by the robbers, by our own samskaras, vasanas, desires, greed, likes and dislikes, prejudices and so on. And we should know that we are not in a good position now. We have to get out of this desire for spiritual liberation. When you have this desire, we may go and listen to lectures. We may feel a kind of inner incompleteness, like Buddha felt. He was living in a luxurious palace. Then he happened to see the darker side of human life. The dead man being taken to the cremation ground, the old man suffering from old age, and the sick man suffering from sickness. So he felt there's a problem in this material life, even in the midst of enjoyments. So he makes an effort to get out of this. So he cries and weeps this as the story, in the story. So when he cries and weeps, it means we are expressing our dissatisfaction with this everyday material life and this manifold experiences, likes and dislikes, happiness and unhappiness and misery and so on. So when we are aware of this, we make some effort. And when we do some work in the direction of coming out of the jungle, so we go to a library, we may read a book, some spiritual work we may read, we may discuss, we may listen to some higher ideas. So we may listen to some lectures which are not talking about how to make a few extra dollars in this world. So there are other options in life other than making money or enjoying this world. So at that time somebody comes to your help. It doesn't mean that at other times this help is not there. We don't listen to that help unless our mind is ready. So then we may read a book, we may listen to some ideas, and then we may learn about some other options in human existence. We may begin our spiritual journey. And then finally we may realize the truth that we are not just this body-mind complexes coming and going, being born, living, enjoying and suffering, dying and again reborn. There is no joy in this cyclic rotation. And when this conviction comes, we try to think of our true nature. We come to Vedanta. To be more specific, we come to Advaita Vedanta. So, Anadi Maya Supto Ida Jiva Prabhuddhite Ajamanidram Aswapnam Advaitam Vidyate Tadha. In the Gaudapada says, this eternal sleep or eternal time. We don't know when we began to sleep. But when we wake up, then only we realize we were sleeping. Unless we wake up, we don't realize that we were sleeping. When we are sleeping, we don't realize we are sleeping. Sleeping is a word we use to a state of experience which we realize only when we come out of it. So eventually we realize our own true nature. This is according to Advaita. Madhvacharya says The right knowledge is not getting back to Gandhara Desha, mean returning to our own true nature, not Jiva Brahmaikyam. Rather, is the right knowledge is the difference between Jiva and Brahman. When you realize that you are totally different from God, you are always dependent upon God, and only because of God's grace you can get spiritual liberation. That is the right knowledge. So that's the polar opposite of Advaita. So the individual, the jiva, is thrown into the dark forest of transmigration. The dark forest is this transmigratory cycle. Being born, living, enjoying and suffering, then getting old, dying, and again being reborn. Continuation of the same cycle. This is the dark forest. And this is because of our ignorance. Ignorance about ignorance of our knowledge that we are totally, eternally different from God. Why this difference becomes a great knowledge is very interesting. It can be a logical fallacy. We have no problem if we unconsciously think that we are the same, the supreme reality. But the moment we realize we are totally different from God, the realization itself is the absolute knowledge. That's what Madhvacharya says, Madhvacharya says. So when we get an instruction from a instructor, or a preceptor, that by the grace of God alone, we can practice Sravana, Manana, etc. And then by the grace of God alone, we will get back to our native home, native land, Gandhara Desha. So, we have to remember, these are two different views of the same concept, same Upanishadic passage. So, perhaps we can also discuss a few more passages. We'll do later. Now we can have interaction. Thank you. Most welcome. You are most welcome to ask questions. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Sri Ram has been waiting to ask a question.
Okay,
From what I understand from what you told us,
yeah.
in Dvaita only we have the goal of Jivan Mukti, that is liberation here and now.
Yeah.
And in the Vishishta Dvaita and Dvaita, it is only Videha Mukti. Is that correct, Swamiji?
Yeah, the very concept of mukti is different in these systems of philosophy. Mukti in Vishishtadvaita and Advaita, Vishishtadvaita and Dvaita, mukti means realizing the truth. According to Madhvacharya, mukti is nothing but the realization of a total difference and distinction from God. And according to Ramanuja, mukti comes through prapatti, through total surrender. That's the state. So when you do total surrender, you become liberated, you realize there is the presence of the divine within you, but still it is different from the divine, but is present in you. So mukti, the word, but in Advaita mukti means our realization of our total identity with the divine reality, present everywhere. I mentioned this earlier, in real life, even after realizing the Advaitic experience, you live in this world as if the world is real. So, it's called Jivan Muktas. The liberated soul, Jivan Muktas, they also live in this world. But the only difference is they know within them that they are one with the divine. So, this world doesn't, the world doesn't shock them. The world doesn't disappoint them. They are not too much attached to this world, and also the world doesn't have any negative impact on them. Because they always see, for example, if you see that the illustration is only partly correct, but there is no better illustration. Suppose you thought it's a snake, but you understood it's only a piece of rope only. You don't cry and weep now, because you know it may look like a snake even now, but you have brought your light and you saw and you touched it, you shook it, you know it's a rope, and you keep it back there. So the only difference is, before you brought light, you thought it was a snake and you were frightened. You're frightened. It may bite you, it may be cobra, it may be viper, something like that. You brought light and you touched it, you lifted it, you may put it on your neck and you put it back on the floor. Now you are no longer frightened, because you know it's not snake. A Jivan Mukta, liberated soul, in according to Dvaita, they continue living this world, but the world doesn't shock them. That's the only difference. The world doesn't disappoint them. It doesn't have any impact on them. That's all.
We have a theory of Pura Sukshma Karna Shrira and the different karma sanchita, Arabja, Agami, and how it applies in this lifetime, how it applies with Jnani.
Could you repeat
There's a
that?
similar theory in Vishishtadvaita and Dvaita.
You said the beginning word, first word, did you use the word Purusha Suktam or something?
No. We have a Stula Sukshma.
Oh, Stula Sukshma. Please repeat the question, please. Okay?
We have these three bodies, and then we know that the Sukshma Sharira, Karna Sharira migrate.
Yeah, okay, no, okay.
Pralaya, the Sukshma Sharira
Okay, I will come to that.
vanishes.
Okay, now you
The
know,
karmas.
yeah, so Sukshma Sharira migrates, that's true. What is Sukshma Sharira? It is called Sharira, which actually means subtle body. So that can create a lot of confusion. It is not body as we understand the physical body. It is a bundle of your natural attitudes and aptitudes, tendencies and impressions called samskaras, vasanas, which express in innumerable ways, which you may have inherited from previous life cycle. That phenomenon is called Sukshma Sharira. Sharira could mean just a collection, a bundle. That's what it is. Sukshma Sharira migrates from body to body. Sthula Sharira, it perishes at the time of death. Sukshma Sharira, it continues to exist. It takes another Sthula Sharira, another physical body. Sukshma Sharira is our true personality, beyond and behind the physical, visible physical body. That's the difference. This Sukshma Sharira also becomes extinct only at the time of Videha Mukti, according to normal tradition. The idea of Videha Mukti as such, as understood in Advaita, is not acceptable as understood in Advaita. Because Mukti in other systems has a different implication. Okay, anybody else?
Yes, Mark, you're next.
Yeah.
Pranam Swamiji.
Namaskar, yeah.
I want to ask a question about the role of faith.
World of faith, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, in some of these examples we've been given, like the breaking of the seed, and then Udaka not being able to see anything, and also the other one with the salt water. Section 12 of the Chandogya Upanishad,
Okay.
where he brings the fruit and he asks him to break it.
Yeah.
And he says, "What do you see?" And he says, "Nothing, revered sir."
Yeah.
Then in verse 2, the father said to him, "Dear boy, this subtle essence which you do not perceive, growing from this subtle essence, the large banyan tree thus stands. Have faith, dear
commentary says, through reasoning and scriptural authority, it is now established that it is from the subtle essence of being without name and form that there grows the universe with its names and forms as a product. Still, faith is essential. For when there is faith, the mind gets concentrated on the subject, and then due understanding follows. Could you comment on that?
Okay, you are referring to the second section, Sadeva Saumidam Agrasi, etc. That's what you are referring to? Egameva Dudiyam, eh?
Yes.
That is second section called Khanda, second section. So what it says is, this world which is manifold, at the very beginning it was nothing but the Advaitic Supreme Reality. In this context, now, Tatha Eke Ahu Asadeva idam agre asid ekameva dvidiya. Now, there are some other people who will tell you that in this manifold phenomenal empirical world, at the very beginning, it was one non-dual and non-existence, means asat. Now remember, this idea is to be rejected. For that, this particular section is discussed. There are people in this world who will tell you that in the beginning, there was something which is really non-existence. From non-existence, all these things have come into existence. That should be rejected. The idea will be rejected by Advaitins in the Upanishad. So the purpose of bringing this idea is to reject that idea. The whole existence came out of nothing. Tatha eke ahu asadeva idam agre asid. At the beginning, agre means srishti prag, means before creation, there was this non-dual but one non-existent reality. That itself is going to be rejected. That is wrong. To emphasize why and how it is wrong, how this idea is wrong, this text is going to be discussed. Okay, that's the idea behind. Because according to them, and actually they tell you, this refers to the views of two prominent schools of non-Vedantic philosophers called Naiyayikas and Vaisheshikas. Please remember that. Naiyayikas and Vaisheshikas. Naiyayikas could also some school of Buddhists. They called Mahavainasikaha, means kind of ultra, you may call it ultra nihilists, you may call. In Buddhism, after Buddha's passing away, many schools developed. But really speaking, you should know, this was some kind of a philosophical school which existed long before Buddhism. Chandogya Upanishad predates Buddhism by several millennia. So even at that time of Chandogya Upanishad, there were people who used to believe that nothingness is the origin of everything. Before so-called creation, there was actually asat, absolute non-existence. Now, according to them, this non-existence was only the absence of existence. Not that there was something which existed, which is non-existence. Rather, there was absence of any kind of existence. I hope you understand the point. So if you read the text, if you know Sanskrit, you understand better, So, what they said, the Naiyayikas and then Vainashikas, there were many anarchists in ancient India. It's very interesting. And they also had their own followings. They were never persecuted. They were never kept out of intellectual discussions or intellectual discourses. Those who believed that the origin of everything was kind of non-existence. He called Mahavainasikas. Later, in some kinds of Buddhism also, this idea later you can find. So the point is, what this means is, according to them, according to Yagas and Vaisheshikas, there was nothing called non-existence existing, but rather it was what existed was the absence of any existence. So is there any difference between absence of any existence and the presence of non-existence? You say, it is slightly troubling, Do you see any difference between the absence of anything called non-existence and do you see any difference between the absence of anything we call existence or the presence of anything called non-existence? Means there was something which cannot be called either existence or non-existent. That idea is supported by one statement in the Rigveda Samhita. It is called Nasadiya Suktam, Srishti Suktam, creation hymn. Nasadasi, Nosadasi, that begins. In the beginning there was neither non-existence nor non-existence, like that. But the implication is there was something which cannot really be called existence or non-existence. Existence can be understood only in terms of something that comes into existence. Non-existence can only be understood as something that really doesn't exist. But something which cannot be called existence and which cannot be called non-existence. In a way, somebody asks you the question, what was the before Big Bang? Where did it come from? Big Bang, where did it come from? It cannot come from nothingness. So somewhere you find that. Somebody asks you the question, what was there before Big Bang? And what caused Big Bang? Nothing can happen without a cause in modern science. We always say an antecedent. That's what it really means. So if we put it in a more philosophical manner, it shows that in the beginning there was something which cannot be called existence or non-existence. So you have to reinterpret the meaning of existence and non-existence to correctly understand this philosophically. But you can imagine what a grand thought system. See, the ancient Upanishad sages could have easily said, God lived here, He created this world, and did this 1, 2, 3. Everything like an engineer making some kind of a carpenter making a chair or something. Very easy. And people will be very happy about it. And they didn't want to do anything that make people happy. That is the force of thought, the boldness of thought in the Upanishads. That's what really impressed great thinkers, Schopenhauer and others. To be very frank with you, when we think of the glorious 19th century, the early part of 19th and even later part of 19th century, all the way from Schopenhauer right up to Paul Deussen, it's a long distance, say 60 years, 70 years of history. What a glorious time when people read these Upanishads and they thought it was something absolutely wonderful. And that gave them very, very wonderful idea of what you really understand religion and spirituality compared to what we see today when we open our eyes. We something so childish, so ridiculous, so laughable, and so diabolical, and actually so dangerous. See, reading these passages, actually when I talk to well-educated philosophical people like you, when I look at you, when I listen to your questions, I cannot but think of the glorious days of the 19th century when great thinkers, I'm talking about those who approach this Vedanta philosophy from outside, from Europe or America, great thinkers who were highly impressed by the very boldness of this. And compared to that, where do we live today? We have gone back to, we traveled backward at least 16 centuries and reached somewhere in the primitive desert. That's where we are standing right now when you look around. Think of this passage, the great, the journey through the thick forests. And what is this forest? This forest is called a forest because it's an unpleasant place to live, to walk through. Mountains, trees, valleys, wild animals, and wilder human beings. That's what a forest means. And that is what this world is. And this is true even for a philosopher like Schopenhauer. They agreed with this, said this world is a forest. So from those times to our own time, we walked a long distance backward in philosophy, in culture, in civilization. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mark. Shay, please go ahead.
yeah.
Hello, Swami. Thank you for the lecture. My question is about the verse in Chandogya that has the Tattwamayanandaji Mahavakya.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I guess when I look at the kanda that it's in, it's hard for me to buy that people really interpret it as Atat-twamasi. Like, how seriously is that taken? Because it feels like in the context of the kanda, he's saying everything comes back to existence. Everything has existence as the root. Everything is the self. All things go back to this one place. And it would make no sense for them to say, and you are not that. It feels not, I guess, honest in some ways, or it almost feels like, why not just say, we don't agree with that one passage, and that's okay to say, we don't agree with that one passage, but it almost feels not honest to say, they're saying it's not Tattwamasi.
Yeah, I can tell you something very interesting. If you read the works of Vyasatirtha, and actually, to be very frank with you, outside a small, tiny region in India, these texts are not taken very seriously, even those who traditionally belong to that community group of people who follow, who claim to follow Madhvacharya, don't really talk about this in today's world. For purpose of doing justice to the subject we are discussing, I discussed this. It is not taken seriously by anyone. So it is obviously a kind of senseless sophistry, absolutely unjustified. I mean, this Shvetaketu, the disciple, was not particularly worried about it. The logical answer he was looking for was very simple. At the beginning of this Chandogya text, his father tells him, look here, my son, did you learn that by which everything becomes known? Did you get that knowledge by everything that is unknown becomes known? Now, this is what the father asked his son to bring him to a sense of propriety, a sense of... You see, I can give the story, so that will make you understand further how absolutely ridiculous this interpretation of Atattvamasi is. Though it is very seriously written about and discussed by the scholars belonging to that school, but not outside that small circle. So, this Uddalaka went abroad. Maybe he was visiting some Vedic schools, teaching Vedas in different Vedic hermitages schools. And he returned one day, and he had already made arrangement for his own son to be taught by a teacher who was staying close by. He had his own responsibilities and obligations to go to a far-off place and teach Vedas. And another great teacher, staying close to his home, was supposed to teach his own son. And he returns home and asks him, did you learn everything? Wonderful. And he found his father was very haughty and proud, And then his father wanted to give him a lesson on humility. And of course, first, he didn't mince words, and you have become so haughty. Swetaketo yennu some idam mahamana anuchanamani stabdha asyuda asi udattam adesa prakshikshata yena sudam bhavadi amadam madam abhijnadam vijnadam katham nu bhagava sa adesho bhavati iti. So the father tells Swetaketu, you have become so haughty and proud. And did you really learn by knowing which everything becomes known? See, Mahamana Anuchanamani Stabdhaha Asi Udatam Adesam Aprakshya. So you have become so haughty, so proud. And really you learn? Did you learn everything that is to be known? Did you learn that by learning which everything becomes known? And then Swetaketu, well, I never even thought or never heard of such a thing. By knowing which everything that is unknown becomes known. So, yatha Swami ekena mutpandena sarvam mrunmayam vijnadam syad, etc. Suppose, you want to know about different articles, different tools made of, let's say, iron, and then you know something about iron, you will know the properties of all those things which are made from the same metal. If you know a little piece of golden ornament, then you will know all about the ornaments could be made from gold. Like that, so did you know that? And he said, absolutely I did not know. Knowing one reality, everything becomes known. So, Swetaketu obviously was looking for some knowledge by which everything becomes known. The essence of all knowledge. Sarvajnami sarvam jnanaditi sarvasva means knowing that everything becomes known. So, and father told him, Saumya, that Atma, that we know, that is you yourself, it is within you. Know your own nature. Then once you know your own nature, you will know that supreme reality that is present everywhere is within you, but not this body. So Swetaketu continued requesting for more illustrations, and father obliged. Finally, Swetaketu realized, because at first he thought his father must be crazy, because that supreme reality you yourself. So, I of course don't think that the craziness is not mentioned here. That I think that should be the truth behind. It's my addition. So anyway, Swetaketu requested for more repetition, more illustration, and father obliged. Finally he realized, well, the father is not talking about my physical body. He's talking about something within me, which is not part of my body-mind complex. The reality, the immanent reality. And that reality is the all-pervading reality itself. Now, this is the story background. You can imagine, do you think this Swetaketu would have requested his father to tell him again and again, no, you are not that, you are not that. You are not that will be easily understood. Because at the beginning itself, he was confused, he was perplexed. When father told him, that supreme reality, you have to give you yourself. You could make no sense of it. I am this body, my name is Swetaketu, this is where I am staying, this is my identity card. So how can I be called the supreme reality? Obviously I cannot understand this. So he requested his father, please repeat again, more illustration. But the fact that the father was not referring to his body-mind complex, but rather something behind and within that body-mind complex, Antaryami, Kudastha Chaitanya. That he understood only towards the end of the text. How can it be Tattwamasi? You are not that. That he would not have asked for more illustrations. So there are of course much more obvious violations, bringing in new rules of grammar. There are in Panini's grammar. On the one hand, it's a very rigid system, but there is enough scope for extreme flexibility. This uniqueness of Sanskrit grammar. It can be extremely inflexible and rigid. But within that, there are rules for exceptions and aberrations. So, All these tools are used with maximum sense of liberty to twist the meaning into something what they want it to mean. So, but the point is, the greatness is, all these ideas were highly appreciated without any fear of excommunication or inquisition or burning at stake. That is the glory and greatness of this Upanishadic tradition. Okay, thank you. So thank you for the wonderful question, and I believe we can conclude now. We will continue our discussion. So please remember, we will have Guru Purnima celebration on 21st July, 10 a.m. it begins. And then we will have a Labor Day retreat on some important topic from one of our scriptures, Bhagavata Purana. It will be from 31st August to 2nd September, that is Labor Day. So thank you, Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. I'm sorry, did
Recording stopped.
did you want to ask any question, Bobby? I hope not. Eh?
David had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. In that case, perhaps please, David, please remember next week.
I did text David to
Yeah.
hold that question for next time.
Yes,
Please.
Swami, I'll just ask, I'll ask next week. Thank you.
Thank you. I also overlooked time, so please ask next week. Always free, any question, anytime. This is an open, open discussion. Thank you,
Very,
Namaskar.
very, very grateful, Maharaj.
Thank you. Anytime you can ask questions.